Billy Carson has been making the rounds talking about a whole bunch of different things. I'm not sure who's been more controversial, him or Terrence Howard. Either way, in this clip with Joe Rogan, they get into the topic about the Anunnaki. Not familiar with the Anunnaki, you still talk about it here a little bit, and we're going to look at some other sources that kind of will paint a fuller picture. So let me go ahead and share the screen and let's jump in.
It's not all fake. These people left behind such detailed records and information. It's a time capsule of information on stone tablets for us today to be able to decipher, break down, and understand, and that's what we're here to do now.
When you look at these ancient languages like cuneiform, can you read that? Do you know how to read it?
Yeah, a small amount of it, yeah. Studying it from books that I have bought right off of Amazon.
Oh.
Yeah, so basically you take a stick. It looks like...
So I'm going to be honest. My first question right off the bat when they get into this is, Joe asked him to decipher the information on these tablets. My first question is Billy Carson able to read these tablets? We didn't have to wait too long for him to answer this, right? And he says he can read small chunks of it. Now, based on what he's saying, it sounds like he is self-taught by using books on Amazon. That gives me pause, being honest. I think it makes you should make us hesitate a little bit. We're listening to someone who is self-taught using books on Amazon. I'm not saying that you can't do that. I'm just saying
how they're going to get their next meal, shelter for the night, and all these kind of things. Who has time to sit down and write these incredible works of art like the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example?
Yeah.
So I think they really were writing down, and also they...
I'm going to pause here just because he says, who has the time to write these wonderful works of art like the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? Because they're basically struggling for survival. Notice how highly he esteems the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, I wonder what he thinks of Genesis and the flood narrative. I just want to point out how this seems a bit like a double standard. You can't have it both ways. If you're going to give credits to the Epic of Gilgamesh, is it really fair to completely discredit and discard the biblical narrative? I don't know. It seems like you're playing with unequal scales.
They were transcribing information that was given to them by these quote-unquote gods with the lowercase g.
So when you're reading things like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh, for people who don't know, is one of the oldest versions of a lot of the stories that you hear in the Bible. Very similar to them. There always seems to be a great flood. There's a few heroes. There's angry gods. There's a bunch of stuff going on. And Zechariah Sitchin's work was like the most controversial on the Sumerian text, right?
Yes.
Because there's a whole website called stitchiniswrong.com. Like people go crazy about him.
Yeah.
But when he starts talking about it, when you read some of the things that they wrote, and when you see like some of the images that they created, the images that look like the double helix from DNA, and
one of the things that Joe mentions is this old stitchiniswrong.com website. That website is ran by no other than Dr. Michael Heiser. Michael Heiser is a scholar. He passed away, I believe, last year. But his work has been such a amazing resource. It has really helped to deepen the knowledge of these kind of topics that are a little on the fringes. And I love how he's kind of discussed these kinds of things and, in a sense, kind of brought them more into the mainstream. He goes on to point out the similarities between the Epic of Gilgamesh and the biblical stories. And to be fair, yes, there are some similarities, but not as many as they make it seem. And I think this is what gets kind of stretched a bit, right? And when it comes to very crucial details about the account, like who it is doing it, is it multiple gods, one god? Is there a battle that happens between the gods? I think there's some crucial details in the account. The similarities are a bit exaggerated. We can't just gloss over that.
There's a bunch of that now we represent the caduceus, which represents pharmacies and drugs. Like that's the old version of an image of the double helix of DNA, or at least it looks super similar to that.
Oh, it definitely is, because it's referenced even in the Egyptian Book of the Dead and other ancient texts. So there's no coincidences here. Now,
somebody said Billy Carson, he can't do this. All those people who are all about Kemet are definitely not going to like this. It sounds like he is saying here that ancient Egyptians, ancient Kemet, got their ideas from the Sumerians. That's a no. Somebody needs to let him know this, that he can't say this kind of stuff. I think this is what happens when we take an overly simplistic approach to history, especially when we're talking about beginnings of civilization. According to experts in this field, right? I'm not an expert, pointing to the experts. The likeliest scenario is that civilization started to develop in different places around the same time.
Zechariah Stitchin, I don't particularly go by his work, not because it's controversial. I believe he was one of the greatest researchers of all time, and the reason why is because he laid.
Yeah, I think you're on your own on that one. Zechariah Stitchin is one of the greatest researchers of all time. Come on, people that are experts in this field who look into these ancient languages have pointed out inconsistencies in Zechariah Stitchin's interpretation. They've put into question his ability to understand the languages, if he was even able to understand them. And when he does interpret them or tries to interpret them, he's interpreting something completely, in some cases, fabricated. Not trying to be that guy, but that's just kind of where it's at. That's what the scholarship seems to be pointing and showing. He gets into this, what they call parallelomania, where you have a slight similarity to this here and this over here. So all of a sudden, that means that this other source copied from another one. That's not the way research works, particularly in ancient history.
Around 1850, George Smith. He actually worked at the I believe it was Cambridge.
And what was his take? Like, when he's reading all these wacky stories and all the Anunnaki stuff? Like, what's his take on it?
He is literally subscribing to this information the way almost that you and I see it today. These people saw something, experienced something, interacted with something, and he cataloged it, and it inspired him to write a complete translation of the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation. And he talks about the fact that that information was copied right from those tablets and put into the Old Testament of the Bible. And so, not exactly like it's going to go from here to.
That's a big claim. You make that kind of claim, you got to be able to substantiate it. You got to be able to show evidence of this happening. Now, this is a short clip, and I don't follow a lot of Billy Carson stuff, so I'm not going to say that he doesn't have anything to help support his claim. I would question whether or not it's actually credible, but this is a different kind of conversation. He says that George Smith, back in the 1850s, it's a long time ago, first of all, so research since that time has improved, right? It's grown. The way we do research, the way we accumulate different resources, different evidences, different facts, it's different now. He says that George Smith found that in the Enuma Elish was later copied into the Old Testament of the Bible.
But it went to other ancient papyruses and scriptures and so forth. And then later on, when it was discovered in caves, people took those and then said, okay, we got to put this into a book. And then it became the Bible much later, around 100 AD. But he subscribed to.
He said it later became the Bible around 100 AD. See, I'm not sure what kind of chronology, what kind of timeline he's using here, because honestly, that just doesn't make any sense. The Old Testament was written much earlier than 100 AD, and maybe he just misspoke. So let's try to be gracious here. The Dead Sea Scrolls date much earlier than this, and there was a scroll of Isaiah found that dates to about 200 BC. And what's really crazy about this Isaiah scroll is that what you found in this scroll dated around 200 BC is practically exactly the same to what we have in our Old Testament in the Bible now.
Anak, we were grasshoppers in their eyesight, it says in the biblical text. So no matter where you go in any culture, you're going to discover that these beings, in some way, shape, or form, engaged mankind, brought knowledge, teaching, building techniques, and just so much more wisdom and information, esoteric wisdom, alchemy. All these things came from these people.
So
but this whole idea, these beings brought knowledge, teaching, building techniques, esoteric wisdom, alchemy. As far as these ideas being in the biblical text, that is incorrect. They are not in the biblical text. We do find some of these ideas in Enoch and this idea of the Watchers. But who are the Watchers? Well, they're not good entities. In fact, in a lot of cases, most people consider them to be demonic. So I'm going to play a video here. This is a video from Michael Heiser.
Stitchin claims that the tablets describe an alien race known as the Anunnaki, who were worshipped by the Sumerians and civilizations afterward. The Anunnaki came from Nibiru, which was, according to Stitchin, a planet beyond Pluto. Now this planet, and again Stitchin claims that the tablets actually tell us this, cycled through the solar system and sort of got in our neighborhood and appears in our neighborhood every 3,600 years. And during one of these cycles, the Anunnaki sort of got off the boat and they visited Earth. When they got to Earth, they genetically engineered primates and made us, human beings. You say, well, why would they do that? Well, the Anunnaki liked gold, it was important to them, and so they wanted to create a race of slaves to mine gold. Now, all of these claims can be tested and deserve attention. What we're going to do is take a look at the tablets and ask the very simple question, do the cuneiform tablets actually speak of an extraterrestrial race known as the Anunnaki who come from a place, a planet, called Nibiru? The way we're going to determine...
In the video with Joe Rogan, Billy makes these claims that these ancient beings came and they modified the genetic code of a chimpanzee to kind of create human beings. He also makes a claim about the gold and kind of how they need it for their planet. He even mentions this idea of something in South Africa. Keep in mind that earlier in the video, Billy also says that he doesn't get a lot of his information from Zechariah Stitchin. Well, this is all stuff from Zechariah Stitchin. I don't know what else to tell you. Now, maybe somebody else is kind of repackaging it and maybe he's just not aware. But yeah, that's Zechariah Stitchin.
Determine if this is valid or not is to go to the primary sources. I'm going to show you a website called the Electronic Text Corpus of Sumerian Literature. We're here at the Electronic Text Corpus of Sumerian Literature website. Now what we need to do is go to where it says Advanced Search and click on that link, and that's going to take us to the search page. And in the field that says Search For, we want to type A-NUN-NA. Now this is Anuna, it's not Anunnaki. Anuna is the lexical form of the word that will capture both forms of this name. Anuna, Anunnaki, same group of deities in Sumerian literature. We want to make sure that we select, instead of form, lemma, and that will capture everything, either Anuna or Anunnaki. So we want to just hit our return key, and what we get is 182 lines in the cuneiform tablets about the Anunnaki. Now you'll notice in the middle column that we have Anuna, and the hit below that is Anun-K, that's Anunnaki. So we get both results in our search. And you say, well, I can't read any of that because I don't know Sumerian either in cuneiform or in transliteration. Well, you don't have to know that. If you look at the second line, there's a little TR right here. If we click on that, that takes us to an English translation of that particular line in that particular tablet. What we have here is a database. This database will allow you to get to every place where the cuneiform tablets talk about the Anunnaki, or the Anuna, the shorter form of the term. You can check the claims of Zechariah Stitchin yourself. All you have to do is click through each hit, each occurrence, and just read the text in English. And you will find something pretty surprising, at least to those who really buy into ancient astronaut theory, specifically that you find all this information in cuneiform tablets. You're going to find that that idea is quite lacking in the primary sources. Now, I'm sure it would be a thrill, maybe at least for me, to go.
Well, let's just pause there and acknowledge what he said. That theory, right, the theory that is being proposed by Zechariah Stitchin, which is essentially what Billy Carson is promoting, is lacking in the primary sources.
Zechariah Stitchin and anyone else who puts forth his ideas that we have Anunnaki, an alien race from a planet called Nibiru, that visited Earth. There are no texts and not even a single line of a cuneiform text that affirm that the Anunnaki are from Nibiru. I'll take it even further than that. There isn't a single text that associates the Anunnaki with Nibiru in any way at all. Now that might sound like an outlandish claim, but I've just shown you the search and you can do the search for yourself. You could take the time to go through all 180 or so lines and validate or invalidate a claim. My claim, again, is that the cuneiform tablets don't have this information. So what's important is that we stick to primary sources for what we say that an ancient person believed or something that happened in the ancient world.
What's important is that we stick to primary sources. I couldn't be better said.
Say about them. 25 figurines were discovered at the site of Ur. 2 of them come from a house in Pit F, dated to the early Ubaid period. They were found along with domestic and utilitarian artifacts, such as pottery, pounders, grinders, flint hoes, clay sickles, net sinkers, and spindle whorls, attesting to their probable use alongside or during everyday activities. Other later Ubaid figurines from Pit F were found in loose soil, in rubbish strata, mixed with Ubaid pottery of earlier phases. Now, did you catch that phrase, in rubbish strata? That means they were actually found in garbage pits. That really isn't the kind of thing that you would do if the thing you were throwing away was an item of worship, a sacred object. But nevertheless, this is where some of these figurines were actually found. So
One of Billy's claims in the conversation with Joe Rogan is that they modified the genetic code in humans to worship these Anunnakis. That doesn't seem to be the case according to the evidence that's been found on these digs. And we don't look at an article here or an entry in this resource from the University of Pennsylvania. So what I want to look at here in the video, they make this claim about the Anunnaki being worshipped, and this is from UPenn. The suggestion that in the Sumerian textual corpus, Anunna are only mentioned in literary text, and that there is no evidence for their worship will have to be reconsidered in light of a new textual evidence from the third period, in which it appears that offerings were made to Anunna. It's okay. First glance, maybe this supports what Billy's saying. The last line is very important. However, as there are only 3 attestations from administrative text, the evidence is still rather meager. There doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence to indicate this. And as you scroll through this, you see that a lot of these terms have changed over time. The way the words are being used to identify the different figures is inconsistent, it's different. Some of that could be because it's different cultures, different languages, the words are used differently. But it doesn't seem to add up. So another one of the claims that is made is that the Bible, the Old Testament, incorporates elements of the Enuma Elish into the scriptures. So this is just a snippet. There are other resources kind of discovering this. This, I think, does a good job of kind of highlighting some of the bigger points and pointing out some distinctions. The story presented in the Enuma Elish is of a great clash between various gods of the Babylonian pantheon. The 2 most important characters are the god Marduk and the goddess Tiamat. After Tiamat prepares many monsters and lesser gods to destroy the remainder of the pantheon, and a few younger gods have already failed at challenging her, Marduk offers to destroy Tiamat in return for being made highest among the gods. The other gods readily accept this offer, and Marduk becomes locked in mortal combat with Tiamat. After killing Tiamat, Marduk splits her body into 2, making one half the sky and one half the earth. He makes humans from his own flesh and bone and brings order to the universe. This has more in common with Greek mythology than it does the biblical text. In the biblical text, there is no representation of the God of the Bible in the scriptures, Yahweh, having a battle with some other god. There's no mention of a goddess, right? Makes humans from his own flesh and bone. That's not what we see in the biblical text. That's very different from saying that they are made in the image of God and in his likeness. Throughout scripture, we are shown over and over again that this God is immaterial, doesn't have a corporeal body. All that to say, when you look a little deeper, when you take the time to compare and do some research and look at scholarly resources, this idea of the Anunnaki coming to the earth, the supposed similarities between the Enuma Elish, the Epic of Gilgamesh with the biblical narratives, just fall short. This is something that's being promoted again, and it's been debunked so many times. It's unfortunate that it kind of keeps coming back. Full transparency here. In my early 20s, I almost fell for this. I was not really grounded. I would say at that point, I was not a Christian. I was not, seeking truth. And someone came up to me and brought this information to me, was talking to me about planet Nibiru and how this planet is coming towards the earth, is going to crash, and the Anunnaki and all this other stuff. And when you do some superficial research, some of the stuff seems to kind of make sense, right? It adds up. Now, thankfully, I was able to kind of go a level deeper as I got older and realized that, hey, this stuff, it just is not accurate, right? It doesn't add up. It's not consistent with what we know to be historical fact. A big thank you to Michael Heiser for addressing these kinds of topics, meeting them head on, and for just all the wonderful work and research that he left for us. Well, thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you next time.